The ground trembled beneath their feet, a low rumble that echoed the discontent simmering in the hearts of the crowd. It was a day like any other in the small town of Eldridge, where the sun cast long shadows over the dilapidated buildings, and the air was thick with the scent of desperation. But today, something was different. Today, the townsfolk had gathered to confront the man who had become a symbol of their struggles, the wealthy landowner, Victor Harrington. Victor stood atop a makeshift platform, his tailored suit gleaming in the sunlight, a stark contrast to the worn clothes of those below him. He was a man who had built his empire on the backs of the very people who now looked up at him with a mix of anger and hope. "You see," he began, his voice smooth and confident, "wealth is not just a matter of luck. It's a matter of choice." As he spoke, the crowd shifted uneasily. They had heard his rhetoric before, the promises of prosperity and growth, but the reality was stark. The rich got richer while the poor remained trapped in a cycle of poverty. The statistics were damning. In Eldridge, the top 1% owned more than half of the town's wealth, while the bottom 50% struggled to make ends meet. Among the crowd was Clara, a single mother of two, her hands calloused from years of hard labor. She had worked multiple jobs, yet every paycheck seemed to vanish before it even touched her hands. "What about us?" she shouted, her voice rising above the murmurs. "What about the families who can't afford to feed their children?" Victor's smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "You must understand, Clara, that wealth is a game. And like any game, it requires strategy." He gestured to the sprawling fields behind him, the land he had acquired through a series of shrewd investments and ruthless negotiations. "I've played the game well. You must learn to do the same." But Clara wasn't interested in games. She was interested in survival. As she looked around at her neighbors, she saw the same weariness etched on their faces. They had played by the rules, yet the rules had been rigged against them. The rich had access to resources, education, and opportunities that were simply out of reach for the poor. The tension in the air thickened as Victor continued to speak, his words dripping with condescension. "You see, the key to success is not just hard work, but knowing how to leverage your assets." He paused, scanning the crowd, his eyes landing on Clara. "Perhaps if you invested in yourself, you could rise above your circumstances." Clara felt a fire ignite within her. "Invested in myself?" she echoed, incredulous. "I've invested everything I have, and it's still not enough." The crowd erupted in agreement, voices rising in a chorus of frustration. Victor, sensing the shift, attempted to regain control. "You must understand, the world is not fair. But that doesn't mean you can't find a way to succeed." He spoke of entrepreneurship, of starting small businesses, of taking risks. But for Clara and her neighbors, the idea of starting a business felt like a cruel joke. They didn't have the capital, the connections, or the safety net to fall back on. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden hue over the scene, Clara felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She realized that the problem wasn't just Victor or the system he represented, it was the very structure of wealth itself. The rich were not just accumulating money. They were hoarding opportunities, creating barriers that kept the poor from ever rising. In that moment, Clara made a decision. She would no longer be a passive participant in this game. She would rally her community, share their stories, and demand change. The crowd began to murmur, a sense of solidarity building among them. They were not alone in their struggles, they were a collective force, and together they could challenge the status quo. As the meeting drew to a close, Clara stepped forward, her voice steady and resolute. "We will not be silenced. We will not accept a system that keeps us in chains. We will fight for our right to thrive, not just survive." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of hope washing over them. Victor, realizing he was losing control, attempted to dismiss their resolve. "You can't change the world with empty words," he sneered. But Clara knew better. Words had power, especially when they were backed by a community united in purpose. Days turned into weeks, and the movement began to grow. Clara organized meetings, shared resources, and connected with local leaders who understood the plight of the poor. They began to advocate for policies that would level the playing field, demanding fair wages, access to education, and support for small businesses. As the movement gained momentum, Victor found himself increasingly isolated. His wealth, once a shield, became a target. The townsfolk began to see through the facade of his success. recognizing the exploitation that lay beneath. The climax of their struggle came during a town hall meeting where Clara stood before the council, flanked by her supporters. "We are not asking for charity," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "We are demanding justice. We deserve the same opportunities as those who have always had a seat at the table." The council listened, the weight of their words hanging in the air. For the first time, the voices of the poor were being heard, and the tide began to turn. In the months that followed, changes began to take shape. New policies were enacted and resources were allocated to support the community. Clara watched as her neighbors began to thrive, their lives slowly transforming as they gained access to the tools they needed to succeed. Victor, on the other hand, found himself increasingly marginalized. His wealth, once a source of power, became a liability. The community he had once exploited now stood united against him, and he could feel the walls closing in. As the sun set on Eldridge, Clara stood on the same platform where Victor had once spoken, but this time, it was her voice that echoed through the streets. "We have proven that change is possible," she proclaimed, her heart swelling with pride. "Together, we can break the cycle of poverty and create a future where everyone has a chance to succeed." The crowd erupted in cheers, a chorus of hope and determination. Clara knew that the journey was far from over, but they had taken the first step toward a brighter future. In the end, it wasn't just about wealth, it was about empowerment, community, and the relentless pursuit of justice. The rich may have built their empires on the backs of the poor, but now the poor were rising, reclaiming their power, and rewriting the narrative of their lives. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Clara looked out over the crowd, a sense of purpose igniting within her. The fight was far from over, but they had proven one undeniable truth: together they could change the world. And in that moment, she understood that true wealth was not measured in dollars, but in the strength of a united community.